How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. And today, I want to discuss the riot that took place in North Carolina. Where's the media coverage? Where's the national attention that this deserves? We lost 4 professional staff members. We lost Correctional Officer Justin Smith, Correctional Supervisor Veronica Darden, Correctional Officer Wendy Shannon, Maintenance Man Geoffrey Howe. Where's the media attention? I have an opinion on why I think that this riot isn't getting the attention it deserves. I also want to talk about understaffing. I want to talk about the incentives to keep or invite new employees, those that are professional, those that we want, those that I would want walking next to me. And I also want to discuss the employee morale after a riot and what needs to be done after a riot. Again, the show is Tier Talk and the discussion is now. Let's talk about the North Carolina riot. Where's the media attention? And the reason why I want to talk about it is just, where's the media attention? Nobody else is talking about it, and I think I realized why. You know, in April, we lost a sergeant by the name of Meggan Callahan. She was a sergeant for the North Carolina Department of Corrections, and her life was taken from us when she was trying to put out a fire to save inmates on a dorm. She goes in to put out the fire, an inmate takes the extinguisher from her, and he takes her out. He also poured scalding hot water on her. Then, North Carolina's hit hard again in October with a riot, 4 inmates looking to escape, and they kill 4 heroes. 4. And then you're thinking automatically, when we lose someone who commits a service to the public, someone that deserves a sense of respect or gratitude from the public, that the news should be all over this. Not just local news, national news, because it's a fallen hero. But you don't see it. And I'm trying to rack my brain around, why is that? And I have an opinion. However, it's humble. It's a humble opinion. But I think that when an issue occurs and one of our heroes are taken, and the public or the media can't minimize the responsibility of the inmate in taking that life, you don't see it aired. Because remember, right now, criminal justice is going through a lot of reform. And that reform seems to be more beneficial to the inmate population, not realizing that those changes are leaving staff vulnerable. And we're pushing for these changes that seem to benefit the population and leaving our heroes vulnerable. So again, I feel that the media attention wasn't there because the changes that politics are trying to push are one-sided and leaving the other side vulnerable. So when stories like this come out to play and you can't minimize the responsibility of the inmates, like in this case here, these murders, all 5, those inmates are totally responsible. There's nothing else to blame here. It's those inmates. I know in past you had riots and we're going to blame the lack of programming, the lack of whatever. What can you blame here? And the reason why I also want to push for more national attention on stories like this is because corrections right now is bleeding from the inside out. And the major concern right now in corrections is understaffed facilities. Understaffed facilities is making our staff vulnerable behind those walls. It's making the facility vulnerable. And when I talk about understaffed facilities, North Carolina, from what I was told from the Charlotte Observer, is looking at anywhere from 15 to 25% down. Now we, on the outside, when we read the articles, we just see numbers. But the inmates know exactly where those numbers are. That means they know exactly where that vulnerability is. And that's scary for staff. That is very scary for staff. It's also scary for other inmates. Because if we don't protect staff, then we're not protecting the population. The staff need the numbers to do their job. But it's not just about quantity. It's about quality. Part of the issue of understaffed facilities is because of the incentive. What are we doing to invite the right qualified personnel for this job? The right qualified professional. Right now, corrections is in desperation because they're looking for quantity over quality. And me being on the front line, I'm going to take that as an insult. Because you better exhaust every every option there is before you put somebody next to me. Because that person should be properly vetted. And if you're cutting back on certain things because you're looking to hire, because you're desperate for numbers, then you're putting my life at risk. And for those officers who have stayed, who have gone through this battle but continue to remain fighting, we owe a lot to them. We should be exhausting every effort for them because they're the ones that are staying true to us. So what do we ask for in return for those that have stayed? Give the right incentive to invite the right people. What I mean by incentive, competitive pay. Nobody working in corrections should be making less than someone working at a McDonald's. And that's not to minimize what they do in McDonald's. It's just to say what we do in corrections is a lot more dangerous. Right? We also need the right benefits. We should be covered. Our families should be covered. We also need a good retirement plan. Not a 401k. We need 25 years in and a pension. 65%. We need that. Because that's going to invite good, qualified people for these positions. Then, when I'm walking next to that person, I could see why that person wanted to take the job. But when that person is taking the job and the incentives aren't there, I'm going to question, why would you even take this job? And wait a second. The fact that I'm asking you, why would you take this job? Who are you? Who have you put next to me? Is this someone I can trust? Because if they have a better opportunity at McDonald's, well then, why would they want to work here? Hopefully it's not because they couldn't get hired at McDonald's. And if they couldn't get hired at McDonald's, what have you put next to me? Also, the respect that corrections deserve. Some states recognize corrections as law enforcement. They see them as true law enforcement officers. We need that nationally. That alone, that title, is not only going to draw a little bit more respect from the community, but it's going to draw people to the job. People that we're going to want. And it could also help us get the training that's needed, which is a whole other discussion. But in the meantime, just as a start, the proper incentive, that recognition, that respect, that can go a long way to filling up those numbers and making sure that there's the proper amount of people in those facilities. And remember, we're hiring for quality, not quantity, quality. Now, when it comes to understaffed facilities, how does that affect frontline? Well, let's do this. First off, if you don't have enough manpower to cover each shift, you're either going to close post, which could be dangerous, or you're going to mandate people. And what I mean by mandate, I mean forcing people to work another shift. And that can happen 1, 2, 3, 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row. And then when you start having staff that's exhausted, can I trust them to watch my back? If somebody's tired after working 3 or 4 doubles in a row, do you think that person is able to watch my back? That's a concern for me. That's a big concern. Plus, think about the employee morale. They come into work for 8 hours or 12 hours in some cases, not knowing if they're going to be able to go home that day. They can't make plans with their family. They're not getting a chance to take a break from the stressors of working in a correctional system and go home and breathe a little. Instead, they're continually in the grind, exhausted, frustrated. And that little time they got home, they can't spend with their family because they're too tired. They're tired, they're exhausted, and the family's frustrated because they don't understand. So now it's possible that the stress of work is starting to come home, and now this person may be losing his family. All because of their commitment to the public, to the Department of Correction. I always thought, in my opinion, the people that are involved in making cuts should definitely be talking to frontline before they make any cuts. Because when they make a cut, it affects those on the front line. So the front line's going to know if that cut is needed or not. They're going to know that. And I've always recommended, and I'm still going to push for this, kind of do this on every episode I do, is a team on standby. Always. Always have a team on standby. It motivates staff to do their job because don't forget, staff has to give directives to people that don't want those directives, which could put staff's lives at risk. So if let's say I'm frontline, I got to give out a directive, and I know that directive may piss off a few inmates, I'm more likely to do it knowing that someone in the back has my back. There's someone in the wings waiting just in case this goes sideways. But I may not do it if I feel that no one's going to have my back. And a lot of times people want to blame correctional staff for not doing their job. It's not that they don't want to do the job. They do want to do their job. It's just that they can't. They can't do their job. That's why we got to give them the proper manpower. And also, when it comes to proper manpower, we can do the preventive measures that are needed to run a safe and secure facility. That means that we have the proper manpower. We can do searches. What a great preventive measure, huh? Searches. It helps knock down contraband, helps make the facility more safe and secured. But instead, all we're doing is reacting. And when we react, it's rather limited because one thing is we don't have the manpower. We don't have the manpower right off the bat, so our reaction is very limited. And also, on another note, if we're just reacting, we're not preventing. We're not preventing. It's the manpower that's going to assure a safe and more secured facility. And thinking about it, just going back, if I have a team in the wings, and let's say I'm a supervisor, I don't have to scramble to find where I'm going to get my team from. I don't have to make some questionable decisions by taking officers off post that should automatically be covered. I know for a fact that a team's going to be there waiting. So then when I go to the wing, or whatever area's got a problem, I can look at it, see what's going on, and then by the time the team comes, I can respond accordingly. As opposed to right now, spending most of my time scrambling to get people, making questionable decisions, and then at that time just having to run in. Because I have no choice. I have no choice, because right now it took however long to get the team, now I got to run in. The employee morale in North Carolina has got to be extremely low. What can we do to increase that employee morale? One thing is, right after a riot occurs, you lock that facility down. You remind inmates who is in control of that facility. And once that control is established, that could also increase the employee morale because they can start to build faith in the system again. But you must lock that facility down. You need to show those inmates who's in control of that house. And that cannot be challenged. And if the public is pushing because they're more worried about their son or that one inmate, then you got to stick up for the reasons why that facility is locked down. It's locked down because at one point control was lost, and now you got to do what you can to make sure that control is regained and maintained. That's the key. So that facility gets locked down. And again, it provides great mental health for those officers because those officers will now start building faith back into the system because right now I'm sure they've lost a little faith and they need to be encouraged. And you lock down that facility because that will remind them that we have control. And again, it'll also remind the inmates who's in control, and you're aggressive with it. And you don't give in no matter how much the public pushes. You make sure that when you open up those cell doors, that it's the right time. That the investigations are done, everything's complete. And if you have to move some inmates around, you move them. If you have to ship them to other states or other facilities within the same state, you ship them. You do whatever you could to maintain a safe environment, but also to remind those inmates who's in control of that house. Once you remind those inmates who are in control, I promise you staff will start seeing that. And staff will fall in line. Because you got to remember something. They're going back into an environment right now that has a lot of stressors for them. They lost 4 people. 4. So imagine if you were them and you had to go back into that environment again. The environment where 4 of your brothers and sisters were killed. The best thing you could do for them is to show them right now aggressively that you got their back. They need that more now than they ever did. And it would be great to see that from the public. It really would. When people start to question the need for that lockdown, it would be great to see people kick back to the public and explain why it's needed. Because you have to increase your employee morale. They have to build faith into the system. And the best way to do it is to get their back. And right now at this point, you have to maintain control, and that control is going to be... ultimately right now, Frontline doesn't feel that they're being heard. They know that the facilities right now, they're vulnerable, and they're on the front line of that vulnerability. And what they need is to be protected. They need laws that protect them. And right now, they just feel forgotten. The attention that is not being given to the death of 5 heroes in North Carolina insults us all on a national level. Because it questions our worth, who we are. It questions our worth to the public. Like our sacrifices that we make, are they being recognized? Because we don't feel it. And that's sad. Because that's also part of our motivation. Part of our motivation to do our job is what we've signed up for, which is literally to protect the public. We have a badge. We're sworn, and we take that oath very seriously. When you have officers that have been killed, and the public rather look to minimize the responsibility of the inmate and turn and blame staff, how do you think that makes us feel? And there's some states here that don't even have a collective bargaining unit. I'm not going to say I'm 100% for unions, but if they're good at giving a voice to those who can't, they're needed. And right now in North Carolina, that voice is needed. And I've always told people that if you can't say something, then we can. Because I've worked that front line. I know what it's like to walk on a tear. I've never been in a riot, but I've been in areas where riots have occurred. And I know how it feels to be vulnerable. And I think in today's day, right now, corrections is more vulnerable than it ever was. There's more push that's one-sided, that's leaving the other side vulnerable. The death of 5 heroes in North Carolina. Let's not forget in February, the death of Lieutenant Stephen Floyd. He was killed in a riot. These deaths should be getting the attention of some major law figures. And what they should be doing is they should be pushing for laws that protect us. But instead, we're getting laws that expose us, that literally are not taking our safety into account. When they had that riot in Delaware, and when it was proven beyond reasonable doubt that management could have stopped this, that it could have been prevented, management response, and one of the articles I read was that it's not their responsibility to protect frontline staff. And for once, the frontline staff, they saw it written down what they felt. They saw management say exactly what Frontline felt. Frontline felt that management didn't care, and the management as an excuse for not preventing what could have saved the life of Lieutenant Stephen Floyd, they say we're not responsible for the safety of Frontline, for the safety of those officers, for the safety of those correctional staff. We are vulnerable. And when a story like this breaks, we need to be one collective voice. We need to get our concerns out there so then we can go ahead and do what we can for the people who can't speak. North Carolina, their front line can't say nothing. They can't speak but we can for them. And I've been hitting up with messages from a lot of frontline staff out of North Carolina. And the crazy thing is, after all this happens, these brave warriors are going to go back to work. They're going to go back into that environment that took the lives of 5 of their brothers and sisters. Lives that they can easily relate to because they work in the field. What we need to do is to make sure that we protect those individuals. And also, if you're in management right now, another thing you need to do is to get a critical incident stress team out there and talk to staff. Make sure they're okay. Talk to everyone. Invest in that. Because right now, they need, I am sure for a fact, that they need someone to speak to. Could you imagine being them? Imagine if a crime happened to you on the streets. And let's say you were with someone that you love dearly and they were killed right in front of you, let's say at a movie theater. Most of us, I probably would avoid going to that movie theater ever again because of the memories that it would trigger. Now imagine these brave young men and women who work in corrections. They lost somebody in a place that they have to go to every day. That means every time they walk behind that wall, they're going to be reminded of what happened. Look at the stressor. But they're still going to commit themselves to that job. They're still going to go ahead and do what needs to get done. And in my opinion, that sacrifice that they're making needs recognition. It needs national attention. It needs people behind them, pushing them forward. Because on a national level, they feel forgotten. Understaffed facilities. Easy fix, proper incentive. It's not being done. It's being done after the fact. After something happens. After something happens. It should be done way beforehand, because I'm going to tell you something, guys. I'm going to tell you something. We need to learn from each other, because what's happened in North Carolina has happened in other states. In Alabama, Kenneth Bettis was killed in a mess hall. Again, argument was facilities were understaffed. So we know it's happening. Especially if you're a leader, you should be reading on what's going on in other states, and then going back to your facility and wondering, how can I fix these things? I know that's what I'm doing. I see what happens at other states, and first thing I do is I go back to my people and say, hey, you heard what happened? This is what happened. What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen here? How can I help? So you're taking the tragedies from other places and you're trying to make your place better. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what state you're in. Whatever happens in Florida, whatever happens in Ohio, whatever happens in Alabama, can easily happen in Jersey, California, New York, North Carolina. We're not isolated from each other. So if that's the case, and we truly are connected by the situations that we are in, then we should find a way to help each other when we're down. Because what happens to my brothers, what happens to my sisters, can happen to me. So we need to see exactly what's going on and how we can make it better. And as management, sometimes we have to admit that we need help. Don't be vain. If your facility is bleeding from the inside out and you got officers or staff that's getting killed or hurt, then you need to get people in that can help you help your front line. You need staff that can come in there and help you make the decisions that are needed to make sure that your facility is as safe and secured as it can be. And I'm going to tell you something. The best way to do that is to talk to that front line. If you talk to that front line, those that are immediately affected by the problems of that facility, they're going to know what's best to fix it. Could the incident in North Carolina have been prevented? It's too soon to say. But I know something for a fact. If these concerns were based on understaffed facilities, then yes, it could have been prevented. And the fact that it wasn't, that's something management's going to have to live with. Because if it could have been prevented, then those lives did not have to be taken. And that was proven in Delaware. And that management, in response, said something cowardly. But in this case here, if this could have been prevented, lives could have been saved. I hope you sleep well tonight, management. I really do. Because that's going to come out. And people are going to know that you could have done something different. And if that's the case, you're going to have to man up and go back to those family members and tell them that you were at fault. As always, love you guys. The show is Tier Talk. Stay